Hey everyone, welcome back to John's Watch. Today I'm taking a look at a new game called Fountains. This game was released on Steam on December 20th, 2024. Its regular price is $19.49 Canadian or your regional equivalent, and it's developed and published by John Pywell. This is a pixel art Souls-like. At the time of recording, I've played an hour and a half, played it all in one go on a Saturday morning, and I thought I'd played enough to be able to talk about the early game at least. When I first saw this, I thought it looked decent, thought it looked interesting. You know, it's pixel art, Souls-like. They're not like the most unique things anymore. There's a lot of indie Souls-likes, and they typically go for a pixel art aesthetic. So I didn't think it looked that unique. And I especially thought the name wasn't particularly inspiring. Fountains all in caps. At least it wasn't like Fountain Souls or something. But yeah, like not the most interesting title. And then as I started playing it, and throughout that hour and a half, I was blown away. This is incredibly impressive. And I'll talk about why I think it's so impressive as we get along. At the start of the game, you start in a dungeon, very much like Dark Souls. There are a lot of nods to Dark Souls for sure, but it's done in a really good way and quite a unique way, I think. You get your first sword, just a regular, like a dull sword or something, and you learn the control scheme. Unfortunately, there's no rebindable controls. Right now, that is something that I think would be great. I've said it before, but I always think it's so bizarre to obviously be so inspired by a game like Dark Souls. Like, this game is very inspired by Dark Souls. And then just to not take the Dark Souls control scheme is very strange. You'd assume your core player base are people who have played Dark Souls, and people like me who have the muscle memory of hundreds of hours in the official Dark Souls games. I don't know why you would want your target audience to just not have that muscle memory and relearn new button combinations. It always irks me. But yeah, that could obviously be fixed with rebindable controls further down the line. But yeah, by default, your attack is on X, which is okay. But roll is on A instead of B, which is not okay. And as you're starting the game, you very quickly learn about, I guess, the central conceit of the game, which is the idea of water. In the bottom left, you've got this water bar. And water is your healing. Later on, when you get ranged abilities, that is also your mana, I guess. When you use a ranged ability, it uses some of your water gauge. And something that I really love is when you empty your water gauge, you're not screwed until the next time you rest at a bonfire. Every time you deal damage to an enemy, you slowly recover a little bit more of your water gauge. So if you are completely out of healing, you don't have to basically go back to a bonfire or try and press on with no more healing. You can just very carefully deal with a couple of enemies, and before you know it, you've got one chunk of your water bar left, or filled back up. You can heal up. Things are looking good. I think that's a really cool system. The healing feels quite forgiving, I guess, because yeah, you don't have a finite number of heals like in Dark Souls where you're out of your Estus flask. That's it, you're not healing anymore. So yeah, I loved in this one that you theoretically have infinite healing as long as you're playing safe and carefully attacking enemies and not being hit to recover your water. You also have a currency in the bottom right, just coins, I guess. And so far the main use for that is every time you come to a bonfire, or as you might have guessed in this game, a fountain. When you rest at a fountain, you can trade, I think it's either 3 or 4 coins for 1 charge of water. So basically, you can refill your water gauge at a bonfire. It doesn't do it automatically, but you can do it for very cheap. Most of the time you're running around with, I don't know, at least 50 coins, I would say. However, there's definitely a fine balance between wanting to save your coins and wanting to spend them. You can also spend them at a couple of merchants. I found, I think, 2 or 3 merchants. And I found a blacksmith, but I didn't have any upgrade materials or the whetstone he was asking for, so I couldn't use him much. But he sold armor sets, which I could have bought if I had more money. But when you die in this game, you permanently drop half of your carried coins. So if you're running around with 100 coins and you die, you drop down to 50, and there's no bloodstains or anything. You can't go retrieve your souls, your currency after you die. So that's what I meant when I said you gotta strike a fine balance between how much money you want to carry around and, you know, where do you want to spend it. Just like Dark Souls, there are also consumable items to give you more coins. They're just these coin pouches, which will give you various amounts of coins. I never used any of them in my playthrough because, like I said, when you die, you lose half of them, so you only want to use them at a merchant pretty much when you're ready to buy something. You can also find various consumable items, like there's a red mushroom that acts a bit like a life gem from Dark Souls 2, where it just, you use it and it slowly heals a little bit of your health over time. There's a blue mushroom which gives you, I think it's like 2 bars in your water gauge, but I believe the effectiveness goes down the more you use in quick succession. You're also able to find different armor sets. You've got kind of a head slot, a helmet slot, and a main armor slot. And also 2 ring slots and a weapon slot. And I found a couple of different armor sets. I found like a knight set, which had very high physical defense, which is denoted by a little shield icon and a number next to it. And then I also found this red cloth armor set, which had less physical defense, but had very good magic defense. So I was kind of swapping those out, swapping the armor sets out depending on what kind of enemies I was fighting. I even found this mask, which I read the item description for, and it's like, allows you to blend in with this certain enemy type. And I just reached this certain enemy type, so I popped this on. And yeah, I was able to walk amongst these like tree plant enemies, and they just didn't attack me. Really, really cool little detail. This game does take even more inspiration from Dark Souls. It has a player messaging system, which I love to see. Like, you start off and you can instantly see player messages saying, like, here, and stuff like that. And perhaps even more key is this game has illusory walls, like Dark Souls. And those 2 systems together is so nice to see. As you're playing, you definitely learn where the illusory walls are. Some of them are quite obvious. Some of them are really, really hidden. And that's where having the player messaging is great, because you'll see what looks like, you know, an inconspicuous little shrub, and there'll be like 3 messages around it, and you're like, what could that mean? You go check the messages, and they're like, secret ahead, and you like walk off to the right behind this shrub, and you're in like a whole new area. It's really cool. I love that, the illusory walls and all the secrets, especially being revealed by the player messaging, is so great. The world is incredibly dense. There are branching paths everywhere. I got very, very lost. It has a map, which is sort of helpful. It's a very, like, pixelated map, so it's not the most useful for trying to find your way around. Not as good as, like, the Elden Ring map, but it's okay. And the world, on top of being so dense, is also so interconnected. I only played an hour and a half. I was finding constant paths back to previous areas, unlocking doors from the other side. You know, if you go to it from the wrong side, it's like, the door doesn't open from this side, and so you manage to circle around it and open it from the other side, and you've got a shortcut. Just constant shortcuts. It was amazing how interconnected this world is. Very reminiscent of Dark Souls 1. I think I only scraped the surface of this system, but underneath the overworld, there's kind of like a cave system, I guess. When you're underground and you open the map, it only shows the overworld, so you're kind of lost when you're underground. But towards the end of my hour and a half, I found this minecart system. You have to pay these miners 15 coins to be able to ride it. And it basically lets you very quickly fast travel underneath the world to other parts of the overworld. Very, very cool. So far, that's the only way of fast traveling I've found. You're not able to travel between fountains, but if you're out in the world, you can press start and travel back to the most recent fountain you rested at. So kind of like a homeward bone, but you can't travel between them that I've found so far. The combat was good. I found that most enemies, pretty much all enemies, were really good about telegraphing their attacks. I think the only downside is I played for an hour and a half and I only fought one boss. I just didn't find any other bosses, unfortunately. The first boss was great. I thought it was really good. I got it to half health and got into the second phase on my first attempt. But I felt like my damage wasn't quite good enough, and I knew I had other places I could go to. So I went around and explored a little bit more, and I managed to find pretty quickly another sword, which had 5 more damage. So I equipped that, and I went back to the boss, and managed to kill it on the next attempt, and 5 damage really made quite a big difference. It felt like such a doable fight on the second attempt, and it was really fun. The boss telegraphed his attacks really well, changed up a little bit in phase 2. Really good introductory boss for sure. There's not a ton in the way of video settings, but it's a pixel art game, so you don't really need too much. You've got a performance mode toggle where you can switch between fancy and fast. I just left it on fancy and I was totally fine. There's 3 FPS limit settings. I would have maybe liked a little bit more, because I didn't have anything that matched my 180 Hz monitor. You can limit the FPS to 30, 60, or 144. Won't make a difference for this video because it's in 60 FPS, but I always like getting to 180 if I can, or having unlocked would be nice, but at least it could go beyond 60, so I cannot complain at all. You've got the option to turn down screen shake or disable it completely, which is fantastic. And you've also got the option to enable or disable a vignette and a CRT filter. I hate having too much noise on my games, so fantastic that you can disable those, love that. You're also able to enable or disable the player messages if you don't like seeing them. I personally love seeing them. I think it's a great feature, especially for such a small one-man game. And I did note in the settings there was another setting at the bottom called secret code, which I didn't look into because I didn't want to like spoil anything, but I think that's very intriguing that that's there. I did want to note that there's one achievement in the game and it's completely hidden, so I have no idea what the achievement is. So I think as of right now there's not really achievements in the game, maybe they'll be added later, but yeah, right now there's nothing, I don't think. So overall, super impressed with my first hour and a half. Really impressive project, especially for a one-man developer, a solo developer. Especially because on the surface it didn't look like it would be that special. It looked like kind of a run-of-the-mill indie pixel art Souls-like, but it does so many things right. I was very impressed by this. There you go, that was a look at the game Fountains. Thank you guys very much for watching. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!